Are you like most sales and other professionals who want to grow their wealth faster than what they are currently doing through their company 401k, even with that company match, the stock market, or just plain saving money? Would you sleep better at night if you had the financial freedom to be job optional in just 3 to 5 years through investing in real assets? Maybe you don't want to stop working, but wouldn't it be cool if you could retire a decade earlier than most and do the traveling you and your family have planned for years while you're still young and can enjoy it? Let's face it, most busy professionals don't have the time or desire to take on more work outside of their W-2 to grow their wealth. On The Wealth Flow, each week we share the stories, the investments, and take a deep dive into the various asset classes that can deliver that accelerated growth to your portfolio passively. That's right, no extra work for you. Instead, we'll put your money to work. Learn what the 95% aren't talking about and join the top 5% of earners today on The Wealth Flow.
Welcome to The Wealth Flow. My guest today is Cody Payne. He is the Senior Vice President of Colliers in Fort Worth, Texas, and specializes in selling office and industrial investment properties in Texas. Over the past 18 years, Cody has sold more than 700 commercial real estate transactions. Cody, welcome to the show.
What's up, my man? How you doing? Thanks for having me.
Yeah, appreciate you being here. And, Cody, if we could start maybe with, where you grew up and what eventually led you to commercial real estate.
Well, I grew up out here in Dallas-Fort Worth, actually in a sub-city called Grand Prairie. Grew up out there. I never was big on school, so I really didn't want to go to college. So I was trying to find a career. I was selling cars. I was trying to find a career that didn't require college, and knew I wanted to do stuff in the commercial real estate aspect, but I couldn't find anybody that would hire me without a college degree. But luckily I found somebody that would. He would take a chance on me. And so he said, "Hey, I'll hire you. You just got to go to school at night." So I made that deal with him, and I worked for him for about 10 years, and he was a good mentor to me. And then just moved on to a national company at that point. And then, joined up, created a team with a bunch of guys we have here, and then got absorbed by an international firm at that point. That's where we're at now.
Yeah. Okay. We got a little bit of a similarity in that as well. I majored in having a great time in college the first couple of years. And so I ended up not graduating initially. I did go back to school and graduated, but
well, I didn't finish. I can tell you that. I didn't finish. I went long enough, and my goal was to make as much money as possible for him, so that I could quit and he wouldn't fire me. So that was my then goal. And so, I'm not too far from a degree, but I have no interest in it. Doesn't do anything if I go get it now at this point.
Exactly.
To say that I have it.
Yep. Makes sense. And so was that initial job that you got working for a real estate broker, did they specialize in commercial or was it in residential?
So he specialized in industrial leasing. Industrial leasing and sales. And so I went over there and started working with him on that side. And he really didn't want me meddling with his stuff. And so he kind of sent me to work on like the smaller bay flex industrial and some office stuff. And so that's kind of where I started. I started actually as a leasing agent and then started doing sales at that point. That's really kind of the best way to get into the sales side, because if you just jump in on the sales side, you really don't know what you're doing. And even though, we've done as many transactions as we've done over the past 18 years, still many times I still don't know what I'm doing. So,
right. It's always learning. So That's good. And so so did you go to Colliers right away? Is that the national firm that you went to?
No, so I worked for David. He bought into the Sperry Van Ness franchise. And then after about 10 years with him, I went to Marcus and Millichap for about 5 years, and then went to Colliers. I think we've been here for 4 years now.
Okay. Great. And I know in the kind of in the intro, you mentioned that you had done quite a bit in the office space, and obviously right now, I think on this morning just reading the commercial real estate news, they were saying office constitutes 43% of the deeds in lieu of foreclosure in Q2 of this year,
Oh, yeah.
which prior year was 20%, so more than double the amount. So I know there's a little bit of pain in that industry. I've always liked office as far as, from an outside looking in. I don't own any offices or office space, but I've always thought, gosh, it seems like when you're dealing with a business versus dealing with, a tenant, it seems like they're more logical from that standpoint.
You would think.
But
You would think.
you would think,
Yeah. I mean, look,
yeah,
the office sector, it's a tricky sector. And so, and you're right, right now it's a big struggle in the office sector. And I think it's going to be that way easily for the next 3 years. The problem with the office sector is it got hit by several waves, right? COVID was kind of the first wave that hit it. And then the technology that came out from then and how businesses adapted to it so quickly and easily. And so that's why you still have so many firms today that no issues working from home. That's a big effector of it. But as far as on the investment side, one thing that a lot of people don't talk about that's been the biggest problem with it is inflation and the cost to refinish out, to renovate, and things of that nature. And so office buildings are, out of any asset class, some of the most expensive to operate, even if it was vacant. And it's just because of all the operational costs. And so when you have buildings, and say take out here, which is a very similar market to where you're at, you've got office buildings that are, just say you're at $20 a foot on your rental rate. Well, the cost to refinish out this vacancy today as compared to just a few years ago is 2-3 times more, but the rental rate has barely changed, if at all. And you've got several markets where the rate, especially in B buildings, have actually gone backwards. So there's a market out here, Richardson, Las Colinas. I leased office space out there, 18 years ago. And many of those buildings' rates today are either the same and some slightly cheaper than what they were then. The only difference is back then their expenses were probably $4 a foot. Now they're $9. And then the TIs are significantly higher. So that's the problem with the office is they've become so much more expensive to run and to re-tenant that the rental rate never kept up with it. And that's why you had all these guys, running to the Class A sector and hoping that would help them out. But I mean, you've got a lot of issues in the office sector that I think will be there for many years. And there's not enough multifamily converters and redevelopers that can shave any of that off, unfortunately.
Right. Do you think there'll be some type of, it seems like going through, you mentioned 3 years, but, going through the next several years, it seems like there will be some stuff sold at, just tremendous discounts and which may make them make sense, but it's still a challenge to navigate. And, I know no one really knows for sure about, now that we're through COVID, a lot of companies are saying, hey, come back to work, working actually from the office. But quite frankly, a lot of them have seen some cost savings, right? They're not having to lease as much space up, not having to, heat and cool X amount of square footage. And, so there's so many cost savings that I can't imagine it'll ever quite go back to where it was.
No, and I don't think it will. And I don't really see why it should. I'm a big believer of people in the office. But I do know that there's quite a few jobs that do very well working from home, like really not a whole lot of difference. And that's also a big factor when people come in and interview for, desk jobs or employees is a lot of them I see and do ask for, hey, how many days a week can I work from home? And so that's also a big deciding factor for just general employees as well. I have no issues in working from home. I have a hard enough time, staying focused as it is. So if I'm sitting at the house, I've got, everything under the sun that'll bother me. But no, I think, there's been a huge, employer-employee changes have been made that have, allowed for that, a little bit more flexibility in working. And so I think, if I'm an office building owner, or if I'm looking to invest in office, I'm going to look at it and I'm going to say, hey, what's going on today is the future. And so understanding that a lot of these suite sizes have come down a little bit. Back in the day, the average square foot per employee was like 250. That number's gone down to like 180 now. And that number can come down a little bit more too. And so, co-working has made such a big splash across the board. Keep in mind, I mean, this out where you're at, 15 years ago, how many co-working operators were out there? Maybe
Right.
Regis, maybe one of those guys, but that's really about it. And now you've got one, all over the place. And so it's a lot of changes like that have affected it. Some for the good, some for the bad, but like I said, I think you've got a lot of issues there. We just closed on 2 office buildings that were foreclosed on. I haven't done a foreclosed office building since 2011. So, and I know there's several more coming down the pipeline. And you see it every day in the news. And, if you kind of pay attention to CoStar, some of these others that, there's always another person or project sending a building back to the bank.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit maybe about any challenges, and then we'll go to industrial, but just still curious on office. From a lending standpoint, what is there viable financing out there at this point for office?
There is. I mean, obviously, if you're getting a loan on it, I mean, they're really going to be very nitpicky at underwriting it. There's one that we just worked on that we closed. I mean, they had to come to the table with 60% down. So there are lending options there. They're not as friendly as they once were,
Right.
but they are there. But really, and when you look at anything, even on the flex industrial side, which I think is one of the hottest asset classes, I mean, you can still get a loan, but it's not the friendliest loan. But yeah, if you're buying an office building and if you're buying it as a investment, not an owner user or anything like that, I mean, those are different types. Those are a little more friendlier. But if you're an investor looking at it, the lender's going to be very, very nitpicky on it. And I would not be surprised. I'm not surprised when we see 40 and 50% down on these at all.
Yeah. No, makes sense. That you wouldn't want to have it leveraged all that much. Just maybe for the audience, you mentioned, owner operator being different. On an owner operator, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but they're going to be not, obviously from the income standpoint, they're going to be looking at the business's performance, versus what the space will be able to lease for. Where if it's an investor, it's going to be all about, what is it currently performing at, and really looking at the financials from that standpoint.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. Yeah, if you're an owner user and you're looking at buying a building for you to occupy, they're going to look at your financials more as far as business operational goes. Now they're still looking at the building for sure, but especially if you go get an SBA loan, which we've been big on owner user people lately because owner user buyers are still out there, so they can still buy these office or industrial buildings generally pretty easily, and especially if they can get an SBA loan with very, sometimes they can get very low down, much friendlier terms, and a much easier style of loan. But yeah, at that point, you're looking at the tenant and the business and then the building.
Yeah. Okay. Sounds good. Well, yeah, why don't we transition over to industrial and tell me a little bit about, what you're seeing in the industrial right now. Whether listening to different economists, it sounds like there's a pretty big shift in what's going on, and the demand for industrial should be very strong for the next decade. But tell me what you're seeing out there.
There is, but you got to keep in mind with industrial, there's many sectors in industrial, right? Like you've got the flex industrial, kind of small incubator spaces, which we specialize in here. Then you've got your kind of larger, light industrial, bigger buildings. Then you got your big box buildings that, people have been building spec all over the place, building these massive 200, 500,000 square foot facilities, which, those are actually slower on the lease up nowadays than they were a couple years ago. And so I think you may see some issues there on some of the spec builds, the ones that were built without a tenant in tow. You may see some hurdles there just because your carry cost on a project like that is pretty heavy.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And so, and especially if you're doing, single tenant or 2 tenant, deals and 500,000 square feet, I mean, and you're starting to see the sublease rise on those quite a bit as well. On the small bay flex industrial side, where you've got, tenants ranging from 1,000 to 5,000 square feet, that's the asset class that I like the most, which I think has some of the highest growth and the highest future potential in it. because you've got funds and institutions that would have never have touched this stuff years and years ago. And now it's an asset class that I think tailors very well to those guys in the future, because it can hedge against inflation much better than, general office and retail and some of these. There's a lot of good positives to it. The releasability, the rental rate growth. And so, and I think that's why we saw, Blackstone make such a big splash whenever they bought PS Business Parks. And you've got a lot of these higher level funds that we've been selling these parks to. And I mean, they have no issues buying in tertiary markets in many cases, or metal construction, which, if we'd have called some of these funds a few years ago for this stuff, they wouldn't have taken our call. But I do like that side. We've seen a lot of good positives on there, and I think it's got a lot of leg room for, the next, 5, 7, 8 years.
Yeah. And so you're when you describe that, you're talking about because you mentioned the square footage on these. So the actual individual offices are fairly small. But is this like an industrial park where you've got multiple tenants? And then I guess tell me a little bit about what kind of tenants you're seeing in that space.
So yeah, I mean, these parks are usually pretty heavy multi-tenanted. We're selling one right now that's I think 225,000 square feet. It's got 100 tenants in it. And, but you got to keep in mind, these small incubator spaces, when you see them, I mean, really the finish out in it is pretty much all warehouse with, in many cases, one office and a bathroom. And now it can go on and be a little bit more extravagant than that, and depending on how you build it and adding frontage and things of that nature. But depending on the asset and how you build it, I mean, these things can tailor to office, showroom, retail, light industrial. They've got a lot of uses to them. And so I think that's what also helps make them attractive.
Yeah. And are they wired and everything for each unit to kind of run on its own? So when the person signs up, they're paying for everything.
All separately metered and everything. And it's, no different than a retail space or something. And so the expenses there are usually much lighter than retail and office. And, a lot of times multifamily. The management side of them, anybody that we sell them to, they say is very, very easy. We love the stuff that we run as well. But I think that you've got a lot of buyers from retail, multifamily, office. A lot of these guys are coming into this asset class. That's why I think it is a future asset class that, will be institutionalized very heavily. I think it's the run that it's on right now is very similar to self-storage long time ago. Because as you remember, self-storage was all mom and pop, private owners all over the place. And now it's very heavily institutionalized.
For sure. Yeah. And so on a lot of the ones that you're working with, Cody, I'm sure there's a mix of existing, but are a lot of these being developed specifically for this purpose and then being sold, or what are you seeing out there?
So there are a lot that, existing is very prominent, especially if it's infill, but there is a tremendous amount of new build. And I'm sure you probably see them out there where you just see these metal buildings popping up and just have, multi-tenant spaces. I mean, they're everywhere out here. And, we were at a convention the other day, and there was hundreds of people there just local out here that are going to be building more and more of these parks. And so, and I can tell you, when we bring one up, they usually sell like that. And so it's kind of like the multifamily guys in, 2015, 2016, when they would get a multifamily project and it would be out the door. It's very similar to that. It's very rare for us to keep one of these on the books as a listing for, any time at all. And so I think as long as that buyer demand is there, you'll continue to see more and more be built.
If it is one that you're kind of, building and then putting on the market, are they doing pre-leasing and getting it as leased up as possible before it hits market, or what is that?
Oh yeah, I would say typically when anybody that's building these, and we're working with several groups on building them that we have some partnerships on as well. We pre-lease. You want to, as soon as you start, putting buildings on the ground, you want to go ahead and start leasing those things. And in many cases, you'll have them leased before the construction's finished. The tenant demand is very good on these. The tenant retention, the tenant turnaround time, when you get a vacancy, time on market, they're all very, very friendly. And, as you asked earlier, where do the tens come from? I mean, they can be anywhere from, landscapers, pool companies, up to, construction companies, showroom people, floor and flooring people can go into these. I mean, anybody that really services neighborhoods loves these type of builds. And then depending on the location and the building type, then maybe you can get some retail guys in there too, in some cases. And so there's a lot. And then, there's also the other side of the condo side, which I'm sure you probably see the car condos that people make that are kind of similar to these. And so we know several guys that are building those across Texas as well to build and sell as condos.
Okay. And just for the audience on that, this is somebody that's building a larger facility similar to what we've been describing, but then rather than leasing out the spaces, they're actually buying those spaces, correct?
Correct, yeah. And so there's a lot of people that build these and sell them as condos as well. I'm not as big of a fan of it because there's no work in the condo sales for us because we don't sell condos, but I like them as the investment side because I think that building portfolio of these over the future to sell to institutions, I think that's where the real money is going to be made.
When somebody is developing something like this, Cody, what are some things that you like to see incorporated in them? And where I'm going with this, or what I'm thinking of is, I don't even know what it's called, but where you can back a truck down into the ramp.
You're talking about a dock door.
There you go, dock. Yeah. So, I mean, is that typical that for most of these to have the ability for an 18-wheeler to back up to?
Yeah, a lot of times you don't see it with a full dock that an 18-wheeler can back up to. A lot of times you'll see it as a grade level, kind of garage style door.
Okay.
So we call the grade level when it looks, when it's basically sitting on the ground and, you access it through a box truck or regular vehicle. The reason you don't see a lot of these, no, not all of them, but some of you do see it, but the reason you don't see a lot of these have the 18-wheeler dock high is because, you got to add obviously more room to be able to bring 18-wheelers in with goods. But also if you've got spaces on the smaller side, those guys usually aren't pulling off of 18-wheelers anyways.
Good point. Good point.
The 18-wheeler is probably longer than their space in many cases.
Right. Yeah, it makes sense. So you have to have a bigger footprint as well, just for all the additional flat work and stuff that's needed to
and so, like I said, but that depends on the park. That depends on the type of tenant you're going after, the location. These parks have quite a few amenities to them that you can add in there. So you want to tailor it to the area, right? Like if you want to add more mezzanine space up high or something of that nature, it really just depends on the area that you're in.
Okay. And where all throughout Texas are you seeing projects, or are you representing sellers?
They're everywhere, Keith. I mean, we just sold a portfolio in East Texas, several projects in West Texas, working on a bunch in, Houston area, up and around Austin. I think we're looking at McAllen as well. I mean, they're literally being built everywhere. And anywhere where there is, a good amount of new home construction or growth, that's when you'll see, a lot of these start to be built. And so, whenever you see large home communities being built or, areas of high growth, it's generally prime for these guys to go in there because that's when you'll also see the self-storage guys go rolling in as well.
Right. Yeah. Makes sense. What about, Cody? Tell me a little bit, I guess, about the leases and maybe how those work and what's a standard term, if there is a standard term when it comes to industrial.
So there's not really a standard. So like for the small bay flex stuff, I mean, we typically don't like to see leases more than, anywhere between 1 and 3 years. And the reason being for that is because of the rental rate growth that we have seen in these over the past several years. And so, like, let me give you an example. An area up in North Fort Worth, there was a park that we sold 2 years ago, and I think their rates were $9 and $10 a foot gross leases, right? Just gross leases. Well, the rental rate growth has been so heavy out there that they're getting 14 triple net, which, I mean, you're talking nearly 40% increase, which, if you had these guys on a 7-year lease or something like that, I mean, you'd have people way under market in the future. And so just because of the growth on these. And that also gives you the flexibility with the tenant too. We like to see one no more than 3.
Okay. That makes sense. Didn't think of it. That's actually different than what I would have thought initially, but makes total sense.
No, that's what a lot of people
saying.
think. And that's why we say, look at it very similar to a multifamily deal. Like I don't think you can go to an apartment complex and rent it for 3-year lease. I don't think, and I think, a lot of them do that to keep that flexibility there.
For sure. Yeah, that makes sense. What about, as far as triple net? You mentioned triple net. Is that typical right now, triple net? And about what are you seeing?
So,
I know it's
for the longest
specific,
time. No, and that's a great question. And that's actually a question we get all the time. So for the longest time, they were really only gross leases for the longest time. And over the past several years, a lot of them have been converting to triple net. A lot of new builds are triple net. And so you kind of have a good mixture of it. Obviously, your goal is to get it to triple net, right? To recapture that expense reimbursement. But that's going to be very dependent on the area. And so, like in East Texas, we sold some stuff in one area. It's really hard to get triple net out there. Those are going to be gross leases. We're working on a project in Tomball outside of Houston. They were gross leases, but they're very easy triple net conversions. And it's because that area allows it. And so the lease type is going to be very area specific as well, but we are seeing a lot more get converted to that triple net, which, is huge. But, like I said, it's no different. Bigger box industrial back in the day, there was a lot more industrial gross leases being done, 15 years ago. And today, most of those are now triple net.
Right. Yeah. Very interesting.
So yeah, it's a great asset class. The small bay flex industrial, it's a great asset class, and I feel like everybody's trying to rush to it. There's really not a lot of people that truly specialize in, selling it and bringing, the light to it. And so that's what me and, my team, we've got several guys on our team that do this. And so that's what our job is to go out, source these larger funds and institutional guys, show them why this product's great. And then keep, getting more and more people to build it so that we can sell it. But we're seeing huge success and interest from a lot of high level people from this stuff. And that's why I say, I believe it is the product type of the future. Which, when I first started, we couldn't sell one of these to save our life. They were like 25, 30, 35 a foot. Nobody wanted it. We're tossing them nowadays, 160, 180, 185, $200 a foot. I mean, they're total game changers.
Wow. Yeah, that's very interesting.
There's so many models you can do into them as well. There's people that kind of make a hybrid co-working model out of them too, to kind of make them like co-working eccentric. You'll usually see that in more higher end areas, like Conroe or something like that. But we're seeing a lot of uniqueness in these and the way they're being built. You got your standard build that just looks like a metal garage building, and you have some that they build and have a lot more architecture look to them. But I think that I can't rave about them enough. Like I said, anytime, we sell an office building or something else for someone else, I mean, we're telling them, hey, go to this asset class. You'll be glad you did.
Yeah. And so with your team, obviously you can help a potential buyer find one, help them lease it up as well. Does your team do leasing?
We do, depending on where the project is and everything else. Okay. I would say our main goal that we do is, we sell the projects, right? We can take them to funds, institutions, high net worth private guys, family offices. We can help people buy them, pull them together to try to sell to an institution. But we also have a couple guys here that are dedicated to new developers or existing developers, and we'll help them find land that's in good locations to build the parks on. And so we offer that as well. And we also offer the ability for us as individuals on our team to partner in on these deals, or if they need some help with money or something like that, we love investing in these asset classes. So we offer a couple different type of platforms to people if they want us to look at partnering with them on the deal as well. But yeah, we've had a huge influx in looking for land for people all over Texas.
Okay. And what about on the financing for these? Is financing? I would assume it's pretty readily available, but is it typically local banks, or what are you seeing on the financing?
Yeah, so it will be mostly local banks. You probably don't want to go to Wells Fargo especially if you're a new guy getting into it. But I'll tell you, the construction financing, it's no different than any other. It's very unfriendly. We're seeing rates anywhere from 7 to 11% on them.
Wow.
So yeah, they're very unfriendly. But if the rents are there and it makes sense and you can understand the lease up timeline, I mean, a lot of these projects make all the sense in the world to do, even at that high of an interest rate. But yeah, it's going to be no different than your traditional construction financing in today's market.
So typically, if you were to build one of these and you do the construction financing, that the rates aren't the best. Once it's built out and leased out, I guess at that point, are you able to go with a permanent, well, semi-permanent, I guess, but regular commercial loan?
Yeah, so that's what most people do is they'll use the construction financing to get it built, get it leased, and then they'll put permanent debt on it at that point. And so a lot of people that are doing it now, are doing it in hopes of at that point, in the next year, 18 months, 24 months, that financing will be much friendlier, which I'm hoping it is. I'm sure you probably are as well. And so that's what a lot of their outlook is, or sometimes they will literally look to sell as soon as it gets leased up. And so we've got guys that do that as well and literally just move on to the next site.
Wow. Okay. That's awesome. You say that it's growing considerably. If you're looking for land, what are some considerations that you be looking for? Obviously, the growth and that kind of thing. But
with land, that's really the tricky spot in it right now, because I think where land is at in the commercial real estate cycle is it's still high in price. Like, we haven't really seen land like really start to come down in seller value and expectation. Which I always thought traditionally, because back when the last market crashed, in 2008-9, I saw a lot of people with land look to get out of it because, there's no cash flow to it. But we just haven't seen that this go around. So you still have land at very high pricing. But if you're saying, hey, I want to build a flex industrial park, what are some parameters I want to look for? Obviously, you want to look for high growth markets, high household incomes, good home values. I prefer a strong homeowner versus renter statistic. And so I like to see more people owning homes than renting, because a lot of times these facilities are built up with neighborhood servicing kind of tenants, right? Like your pool guys and your landscapers and stuff like that. And then I love frontage. I'm a big believer of frontage. I think frontage is huge, because sometimes that will allow you to get key, retailer showroom kind of tenants up front, maybe get a little bit more money out of rents out of those guys. I'm a big believer in having a good, strong location. You don't have to. There's plenty of these that are built off the beaten path and hugely successful. I just am always big on location, because location is value at the end of the day.
What about as far as tenants? You see very many that are different gyms and stuff. I can remember just one of the places I used to be a member of. It was kind of tucked away in this industrial park. Just curious.
No, yeah. I mean, you'll see little CrossFit gyms in there all the time. I mean, you'll see literally any type of tenant can be in these projects. I've seen karate schools, dance studios. I mean, any of these things. And so, but yeah, gyms, I think have really started to flock to some of these because they can save a lot of money in going to these parks instead of retail centers.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so there was one project we were working on up there in North Lake, and a karate school wanted to lease there because they were paying $30 triple net, and they could go there and pay $12. And so, they may not have got as good a frontage, but you're saving 2/3 on the rate.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Plus, once you've got the members built up, and depending on how you're being successful getting them, it makes
Well,
sense that
and
you want.
gyms, unless you go to like a 24-hour LA, I don't think a lot of it. I think it's very similar to car insurance companies. Remember back in the day, they used to be in every retail center, but
Right. Yeah.
now if you want to change carriers, you don't drive to the insurance company next to Walmart and walk in there. You usually do your bidding online at that point. And so
That's true.
I think a lot of those guys are kind of in that parameter as well. Because even whenever I was looking for a new gym I was looking to get a personal trainer. I mean, I went online and looked. I didn't drive to each one to figure it out.
Yeah. Yeah. Makes sense. What about insurance? Anything to consider there? Any specific parameters when it comes to putting insurance on these?
No, just like with every asset class right now, insurance is a beating across the board. Insurance is something that's affecting all owners. Depending on if the buildings are sprinklered or not. But getting insurance isn't really difficult. But I've seen insurance is hammering the office sector pretty hard too, because, you got to keep in mind replacing a roof on an office building, those TPO roofs are very, very expensive.
Right.
But no, we don't really see any insurance issues here. The only issues that we really ever see if you run into a park is really just parking. A lot of them just are underparked. And so that's one thing we always tell people is do not underestimate how much parking you actually truly need, because people try to get away with the minimum, and the minimum makes these parks look like, it's just a giant, car lot for sale. And so that's probably our biggest thing that we tell people is you can skip on the parking, but you'll be paying for it at some point.
Right. Right. No, that makes sense. I've seen several projects like that, whether it be industrial or anywhere else where, somebody went with the minimum and it's like, gosh, the thing
Yeah. Well, that's
fills
why
up, makes it very difficult for the customer that's going to be coming in and out.
Well, and that's why if you want to build an office building, a city is going to require you to have a certain amount of parking, and a lot of those guys are, 4 per 1,000, around that number, 4 or 5 per 1,000. But they're not as regulated as heavy on what they need for parking. But that's one thing that we tell people, because we were at a park the other day and we couldn't even drive through there. There were so many cars there.
Yeah. Okay. How about zoning and that kind of thing? I mean, I assume you're going to have, just like anything else, need to be in the right area. But are you seeing any obstacles with, people not wanting it in their backyard, or not so much?
Oh yeah, no. I mean, I'll tell you, years ago, cities didn't want them at all. They thought metal buildings were ugly. They didn't want them. They've become much more friendly towards them. One thing that a lot of people are doing on these is finding the sites in the ETJ to where they're not, trying to be on that line right next to the city. That way they don't have to worry about zoning, and they can kind of cut some corners and this and that. But as far as zoning, getting it rezoned, the only hurdles that we really see on these is some cities will make you do a facade on the part that faces the road, so it's not straight metal. And may add some rock or some brick or something like that. But as far as city code goes with these, we don't really see a lot of hurdles with that. I think the city officials are more busy with multifamily and office, trying to make those things look up to par. These are a little more generalized, it seems like.
How about connecting, if somebody does want to invest and build one of these, to either sell or to, go permanent on the financing and just hold on to it as an investment. Do you have people that you are working with that you could refer to for design and, kind of be able to understand, like, here's a spot and here's kind of things that can be done on that?
No, absolutely. And so, what we always say is, even though they're in many times metal buildings, you still want to make it look good and look better than everyone else, right? Anytime you're building a new asset, it doesn't matter what asset class you're in. You always want to kind of put yourself in this box and put everyone else in this box, and you want to be an outlier, right? You want to be something that people want to flock to. And so, yeah, there's several builders that we recommend to people that are pretty good. Some smaller time guys. You really don't need like huge like designer people for it. Usually, the metal building builders have a pretty good book of stuff that they've done, changing up color schemes and things of that nature, maybe adding a few accent pieces. And so, I always say to make it a little bit more unique, because we see people build the standard, kind of gray metal building, and it's just kind of ran long ways, and it's just door. I mean, you can do that, but you always want to kind of be that outlier, because, like with anything, and it's just like if you have a multifamily complex or an office building, when the market's, starts to get tight and you get a little chink in the chain, you want to have something that people want to go to. And whenever you're competing against tenants, you want to be able to have something that nobody else has, or offer something nobody else has. And so I'm always a big believer in doing that in whatever asset class you do. But in these, I think it's pretty simple to do. A lot of people just don't do it.
Okay. Oh, that makes sense.
Long answer. Sorry, that was a very long answer.
No, that was good answer. Good answer. What about anything else, maybe, Cody, that people should know about Colliers, or know about the services that you offer? Yeah,
no, like I said, our main thing is investment sales. It's what I've done for a majority of my career. If someone's looking to get into the flex industrial side, I think we're the leaders in Texas on it. We love helping people find land to build it on, or if someone's looking at a piece of land, people send us stuff all the time saying, hey, is this a good site? What do you think my rate will be? What do you think the lease up time is? And we've got a great report that we can run that kind of shows, hey, this is probably where your rate will be, and this is what is to be expected. As far as lease up time and timing and things of that nature. So, we can help people find the land, help them, direct and get it built. We don't do construction management or anything like that, but we can help them kind of design stuff. We've got a great program that can, we can put a piece of land in it, figure out how many buildings and square feet we can get on it. But at the end of the day, our MO is to be the investment sale brokers on these things.
Yeah. Okay, cool. That sounds good. Well, Cody, this has been really good. How can people find out more about you?
Easy. We're on Colliers.com, flexbusinessparks.com. I'm a big proponent of LinkedIn, so I'm always on there. Cody Payne. Very easy to find.
What about if somebody wants to, I assume that some of the projects are going to come on to like your standard Crexy and LoopNet, but I imagine that
it's rare.
Okay.
Yeah, it's rare. As far as the Flex part goes, I couldn't tell you the last time we had one listed on a Crexy or a LoopNet. It's been years. And it's because we've got a huge list. I mean, our database is now over 150,000 investors that when we get one, we send it to. And that's just because of how many people have been coming to this asset class. And so we usually will send it out and can have it sold pretty quickly therein. And so, the best way for people to get in with us is to just hound me or one of my guys if they're looking for an existing product, and we'll find them one. We always do.
Okay. Cool. Sounds good. Before I let you go today, I'll have to make sure you got my information to be able to at least check some of those out.
A couple good ones for you.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Well, when you're not selling industrial space, what do you do, Cody, for fun?
Man, I'm a big car guy. I like cars from the 70s. So I've got a bunch of classic cars from the 70s that I have fixed up. My grandpa was a big car guy. My dad was a car guy. It just kind of got passed down to me. And so, I love going to car shows. I've got a really cool Mustang Dominator, 1972 that I take to these. Can win any show in Texas. But just anything car related, love going to the track, hanging out there. And so, usually fixing up something old. So I'm trying to find my next project. I just finished a 1970 Chevelle. And so I'm kind of looking for my next, my next one. Yeah. Oh, it's a cool ride.
Yeah. So what do you currently have as far as the?
I've got an old '72 Mustang, a Chevelle, and an old Corvette.
Cool.
Yeah,
Okay.
I just got rid of an old Cadillac that I had and whatnot. I try to keep it pretty slim. You can only drive so many cars at once, but
Sure.
but yeah, big fan. The Mustang that I have is my favorite. I worked on that car for about 5 years.
Oh, wow. Okay. Cool. All right. Cool. Cody, this has been fun. And I got just a couple more questions for you that I asked every guest.
Let's do it.
And one would be somebody that maybe is just starting out in their investment journey. What advice would you give them?
I mean, I think you need to do, what I did or what anybody did. I mean, you go find somebody that knows a lot more about it, find a specialist, kind of align yourself with them, get in, with somebody that knows what they're doing. Don't be, Mr. Know-it-all. I know I struggle with that sometimes in my life, try to, know everything, but getting in with people that know more than you, I think would probably be the biggest key. Especially if you're looking to invest in like a flex industrial park, you really need to know some of the players in the business, and they'll kind of help guide you on where to go. And that's where we make a lot of our money is with new guys.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. And one other question that I have is just any book recommendations. It doesn't have to be real estate, but it can be. But anything that you've read recently that
I read that Grant Cardone 10X rule a while back ago.
Yeah.
I don't know if you knew that one or not.
Yeah.
I liked that one. That one was pretty good. There was actually a Joel Osteen book that was pretty good that was really just talked about how to live a better life, And so, regardless of what anybody, I know everybody's got an opinion on Joel Osteen, but it was just a book about how to live a better life. It was more of a motivating book. And, I want to say it was called like Live Better, Do Better or something like that. And so that was pretty good. I did like the Grant Cardone one, even though I felt at the end of the day, he was basically saying whatever you're doing, times it by 10.
Right.
And so you can only times so much stuff by 10 until you're like, right. Man, I went to bed at 2 and I woke up at 2:30. Like I'm trying here, And so, but I did like it. It was, I think it was a pretty good motivating book. And, there's another guy out. I don't think he's got a book, but there's a social media guy out that I've been following a lot named, Andy Elliott?
I don't.
He's a sales trainer guy, that you'll see all over YouTube and Instagram, but, he's pretty good, big into fitness, family, business. I feel like he's like the new up and coming Grant Cardone. I like him a lot. So he's pretty good. So he's just the guy I've been watching just in general.
Okay. I'll have to check him out then.
Yeah.
All right, cool, Cody. Well, hey, I appreciate you being on the Wealth Flow and have enjoyed our time together here today.
All right. Thanks, Keith. I appreciate it.
All right. Thank you.
Being that you're still here, I trust you found value in this episode. I personally wish I would have known these guests and strategies when I started my wealth creation journey. Go to wealthflow.capital to subscribe to our newsletter. And as a free gift, we will send you our quarterly market report and the top 10 things to look for in an investment opportunity. Take a minute to give our show a rating and review. Help us reach 1 million professionals by subscribing and sharing this episode with someone you know who could also find value in it.